Hello, good morning. My name is Pedro Heredia. I'm one of the partners of Pellicer Heredia. Today, we are going to make a brief explanation of a conveyancing process. Why it is important to make prevention, to take care which are the situations where someone wants to invest in a property in Spain. First of all, in order to check or to make a due diligence by us as lawyers, what we check is the land registry. Land registry is very important because it says who is the owner and which is the situation previously about the ownership, when they bought it, if they made any amendments in the house or in the land registry, and if there is any charges on encumbrances. For example, if we have a land registry information, we can see at that time if there is a mortgage, or if there is some rights by a creditor, or if there is some affections regarding taxes that has not been paid duly by the ownerships. So the first thing is the land registry info, where it says really the situation which is being inscribed in a public office as the land registry. Second thing, what are the things that we need to make in order to make a due diligence to prevent and check if all things are correctly done by the owner before selling, is the city council. The city council which gives all the council tax in order to see if it's been paid or not, which is the planning law situation. Sometimes regarding, for example, apartments or flats, it's easy to understand which is the planning situation, but sometimes there are houses that are on the countryside or in areas that has not been developed correctly. So these things needs to be checked correctly in order to say that in the future will not be any problem. Or, for example, imagine that the owner has made some constructions with or without license. If it's with license, this has been included in the land registry or not. Or if the owner has made some works without license, we need to check if there is a prescription. We need to check if there is a file opened by the city council in the name of that property or that owners. So these two things are really important: land registry and the municipality, to check really which is the situation about the property. Then we need to, of course, to check all the offices, which is cadastral office, in order to duly identify that all the edification, all the square meters that has been duly declared are really in the land registry. This is easy to do it. Of course, what we apply for is the council tax, where it says some references in order to get that info easily. Of course, in a process of conveyancing, the first thing that comes is when you go to see a property and to decide this is the property that I want to buy. Of course, you have an agreement with the estate agent in order to pay some fee to pull the property out of the market and then to start the process of buying the property. Normally, what my experience says is that it's paid between 5 to 10% of the deposit in order to start, and then between 1 month, 3 months time, more or less, is the completion, where the property is going to be transmitted by the seller to the purchaser, which will be the new owner. The buyer, once he signed the private contract, is not the owner. He has the right to be the owner, but will be the owner when the completion is made. And when the completion needs to be made, well, but the parties agree, and the completion is done in a notary office. The notary office in Spain is really important. It's a public office where a notary gives faith that the vendor is really the vendor and the purchaser is really the purchaser. The vendor, with the identification of passports or identification numbers, it shows to the notary that they are the owners and they are duly identified in order to sell the property in a public office. And then the purchaser with passports or Spanish DNA in order to identify who are the purchasers. Of course, the situations in a purchase is very simple. Is the consent of the parties, seller and buyer, which is the price, and which is the object, which is the property duly described. Apart from that, there are different situations regarding some charges that may incur seller and purchaser. Let's start with the seller. The seller will have to pay, firstly, a capital gains tax. Not that at that time will be for the following year, but this is the main tax that will have to be paid. Imagine that a situation that someone buys a property for 100,000 euros and then sell it for 200,000 euros. Well, we know that there is a capital gains tax. Tax office will know that some years ago bought it for 100,000 euros and then it's bought by 200,000 euros. Then capital gains tax needs to be checked. The seller may have to declare new building that was done correctly, but was not inscribed in the land registry. Well, that information needs to be inscribed and has some costs regarding in order to update the information in the land registry. Apart from that, there will be some charges, of course, if they instruct a lawyer, if they have not paid duly the council tax, if they have not paid, let's say, for example, water, electricity. All these things will need to be cleared. The seller also will have some difference between if they are resident, tax resident, or non-resident on tax matters. If they are non-resident, the purchaser will retain 3%. So let's put the example, 100,000 euros as a price. The seller will not receive that amount, will receive 97,000 euros. 3%, which is in this example 3,000 euros, will be deducted by the purchaser and will be paid to the government in order to retain something for capital gains tax. If there is no capital gains tax and, of course, something is retained, that 3%, the seller will be able to apply back that money as in order to justify or argue to the government that has not been any capital gains tax. Okay, let's go right now to the purchaser side, the buyer. Which are the costs that the buyer is going to incur in order to buy a property? Well, the first thing is going to be the tax, transmission tax. Transmission tax is, it has some differences between the regions in Spain. We have from 8% to 10%. Right now, I'm based, for example, in the Valencia region. In this region, it's 10% when it's like second-hand property. It's like not new. It's not new property. It's 10% tax. Let's put again the example of 100,000 euros price. So it will be 100,000 euros plus 10% tax. Apart from that, we'll incur in other costs. Let's say the notary fees and registry fees, which will be around 1,200 euros in order to inscribe the property in the land registry. If you instruct a lawyer, of course, will incur some costs. And in case that there is something, for example, when something is made, a due diligence is made, and something is wrong or can be subsanated, of course, that money will be able to be deducted by the seller. Normally, 99% of the situations are correct. No need to be like worry about if something is needs to be subsanated, if something is not declared, if something is not duly correct, because then things can be subsanated, of course, with an independent advisor, independent lawyer, independent solicitor, whoever gives you a confidential situation in order to make a proper due diligence about the property. Once the price is paid to the seller and the completion is done in a notary office, well, then it just needs to be changed. The council tax and electric bills, water bills, and community fees, for example, in case there is a community of owners, needs to be changed in the name of a new owner, and that's it. Once the land registry inscribed properly the property in the name of the buyers, then the file is duly closed. Then will be the situation if the purchaser is going to be a resident or not, but this is nothing to do with the process of buying a property. My recommendation is be aware that it's always needed to prevent any situation that can be wrong before all the process starts. Of course, there are some contracts, private contract with the agents that needs to be signed, and of course all this requires a proper due diligence by proper independent advisors. We of course, in this law office, we offer this service, and we are happy to inform you freely by email, by telephone, of course by personally in our office. Thank you very much for listening.